Hello, Charles County. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Cracking the Code, where we talk about all things related to zoning, permits, codes, regulations here in Charles County. I'm Doria Fleisher in the Media Division. I'm joined as always by the wonderful Liz Theobalds, our Deputy County Attorney. Thanks for being here, Liz.
Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Always. Open invitation. And we are doing a special episode today all about animal control. So Lieutenant Katy Rosche from Animal Control is here with us. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you did one podcast with us before, and you were brave enough to come back.
I was.
I love it. And we actually, when you and I sat and planned out what we were going to talk about today, we had a really long list. This was kind of like step one. So I think you might be stuck with us. I feel like Liz got stuck and then never left, and then you might get stuck like this. We could go on for days and years and months about all this good stuff. So thanks for coming in. It is.
It informs our community, so therefore they have a resource to go ahead and reference.
Yes, and I would go ahead.
I have 20 years left until I retire, so I'm stuck for 20 years.
I love it. And I think what I notice, I mean, I am an animal person, but I notice that like it seems like more and more people around me are animal people. Is there statistics about that, like more people having animals, or is it just my imagination?
There are. I don't know the exact number.
But it's a thing. Yes, it's going up.
A bit of people, there's statistics of X amount of people own X amount of dogs or cats or specific animals.
More than we used to. And I guess as kind of putting that into perspective, how many animal control officers for Charles County government?
We have 8. And then we have a lieutenant and a chief, so 10 total.
And what would that have been? Do you know those numbers from 5 or 10 years ago? Now I'm really putting you on the spot.
Right. No, I believe about 5 years ago we had 3 to 4, depending on the allotted slots.
Yeah.
So we've definitely increased our numbers, which is a huge blessing.
Yeah. So, Katy, I want to start with what the rules and regulations that animal control follows in Charles County, because it's not like you and your officers are just out on the street making this up, like walking around and being like, I like this dog, I don't like that dog, I like this person, I don't like that person. This is all very regulated, right?
Correct.
And if you didn't follow those codes, those rules, those regulations, you would get in big trouble with Liz Theobalds, you'd get in big trouble with the state of Maryland.
Multiple people, yes.
Multiple people, so much big trouble. Okay, so talk to us about the county regulations, the state laws that you all fall under, and Liz, I know you'll pepper in with the legal side.
Sure. Yeah, so we are, as animal control officers, sworn by the state of Maryland as peace officers. So we have the authority to enforce state laws pertaining to animals and also county regulations. So there's a section of the state code that pertain to animals, and there's also a section of the county code that pertains to animals.
And I just want to clarify, you're using the word peace, P-E-A-C-E.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like people get confused of like, and we'll talk about the uniform in a little bit of how you look anyway.
Right.
But that peace officer is how you're designed.
Yes.
And Liz, I see you. Are you going to throw something out there about that?
No, actually.
Oh, I thought you were leaning in to be like, I've got something about this. Okay, so you fall under Maryland sworn officer.
Correct.
And that means that there are some things that the state of Maryland says have to happen.
Correct.
But then there's also stuff that the county says.
Yes. So all of there are state laws, and then the county regulations are derived from the state laws. So state laws are kind of vague, and they're kind of vague for a reason, because every county in the state of Maryland has their own regulations or county code. So they're able to kind of tailor and from the state law, they're able to tailor their regulations to kind of fit their county. So that's what they're kind of looking for when we enforce our regulations. It's all derived from the state law. It's just something that's been approved by the commissioners, in years past, that is approved and kind of good for our county.
And Liz, am I correct that if it is state law, the commissioners can't change that? The commissioners can't say, actually, we want this in Charles County, but they can do more.
They can go ahead and add to it.
Okay.
I will have to say also that there is a portion of the state law, which is in animal matters with reference to animal control, that really does apply specifically to Charles County. But you're absolutely right. It's been adopted by our county commissioners, and they have the authority to go ahead and enforce those laws.
Interesting. And what are the ones, like, if I said to you, and I'm putting you on the spot again, if I said, like, what's the most important law that you think people should know, or what's the most important code that people should know, what would you say?
It's kind of a loaded question because I think all of them are important.
Right.
But some of the top ones that we deal with regularly are, some people just don't realize that they have to have their animals vaccinated. And when I say animals, specifically dogs, cats, and ferrets within the county have to be vaccinated against the rabies virus. So that's a really hot topic that we deal with quite often, is many people's animals just aren't vaccinated, or they've been vaccinated once 6 years ago, and that vaccination is just no longer valid. So
Right.
that's a really one of the top, I think, regulations, and it is actually a state law that animals have to be vaccinated for rabies. So that's a pretty hot topic that we deal with on the regular. Another one that we see quite often, especially now because there's snow on the ground, it's below freezing temperatures, or even in the summer months when it's very hot out.
So
and there's
extreme
heat
temps on
wave.
either end.
Yeah. Some people don't realize that animals are allowed to be housed outside, but then some people do house their animals outside, but they're not following the proper regulations of they have to have this certain type of shelter. They actually have to have water that's not able to be frozen. They have to have bedding. So there's things like that that are they're all important, but
those are the ones that you hear
right.
A lot of calls about. Gotcha.
And I would go ahead and
Yeah.
add to this one, it's one that seems to come up in connection with rabies, is licensing. Licensing is something that is required by the state law, and it is required by county regulations as well. And that's something that's really just another part of the important part of what people may not realize is out there in the law.
Right. All right. And then I'm going to ask, now we're going off on this is why I like having conversations with you guys. And for somebody whose response was, okay, rabies, fine, I get it. I have to vaccinate my animal for rabies. That's a big deal, right? Nobody wants rabies. We've all seen Old Yeller. What about the licensing? So, Liz, one of the things you're so good about in these Cracking the Code episodes is kind of bringing back together. These are not just willy-nilly, made up things to keep people busy in the Charles County government building.
Absolutely not.
So why is licensing something that Charles County, that the state, thinks is important?
First, I would ask from Katie's perspective.
Sure. So you have to have a driver's license to operate a car. You have to have a license, to operate a business. It's the same thing to own a dog or a cat. You have to have a license. This is kind of more. It's a license to own them, but it's also more of an identification because there is a tag, just like you would get for a rabies vaccination, or get an ID tag for your dog or cat from a vet or PetSmart or wherever. It's also another form of identification.
Gotcha.
So if animal control picks up your animal and they're able to see this tag on them that says, hey, this is Fido and owned by Mr. Smith, we can reunite dog to owner instead of having to take him down to the shelter and having the owner go through all that process to reclaim and pay fees and whatnot. So it's a license, one, to own an animal, but then another identification purpose.
That makes sense. Are you going to add to that? Yeah.
And yes, I'll add to that by saying it's all important because we want to keep our furry family members.
You did that
very
well.
safe.
It should have been furry family friends, Liz.
But they're family members too for many of us.
I guess, but the 3 F's would have been such good
Oh, okay,
alliteration.
fine.
Yeah.
All right. So
Sorry.
anyway,
I was
our
listening.
furry
It was
family
rolling off your
friends,
tongue.
Yes, we want to keep them safe, but it is also just like Katie said, it's really important to be able to connect people back with their dogs when they run off or their cats when they escape, because they are those important parts of our family.
Yeah.
And I think in another thing, it also helps people make their own communities safe. You don't need to have dogs wandering around unlicensed and things like that. So I just think that is important part of the law.
I think it goes back to what I think about when you say a community that people want to live in, and to your point, Katie, the idea that, I have a driver's license, so you know who I am. It's just something that we do.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, we know you're peace officers. What are the roles and responsibilities that you guys have? So if we can start with kind of how you get trained and educated up to what you do on the day-to-day. And then I'm going to ask questions about your uniform, because when we do Citizens Academy, that's one of the hot topics. People want to know what you're wearing and what you're carrying.
Right. So first and foremost, to be hired as an animal control officer, what Charles County looks for is, do you have not necessarily animal experience, because I can teach you animal experience. I can teach you how to properly and safely handle a dog or a horse or whatever type of animal you are expected to handle. But people skills are so important. So have you worked in any type of law enforcement in the past? Because we are law enforcement. Contrary to popular belief, we do enforce laws. So we are law enforcement.
Right.
We do have the capability of, charging people at the state level criminally and at misdemeanor and felony level. So the people skills are extremely important, but when you're hired as an animal control officer, within a year of hire within the state of Maryland, you have to attend the East Coast Animal Control Academy. And then after that in Charles County, you go through a pretty extensive field training program, anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on, that officer's level of experience. And that really is just a rigorous, hey, this is the job, this is what we're training them on: state laws, county regulations, day-to-day operations,
And they're shadowing a more seasoned officer.
Correct,
So they even
yes.
just learning, like, I don't know, I always think about people who are new to Charles County of like your first time driving to Nanchemoy.
Yes.
Like, this is still a part of the state of Maryland.
Yes.
It's still a part of Charles County. You should know
Yes.
how to get there. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, there again, it's just a rigorous process of this. These are all the things that you need to know to be, you know, an officer within Charles County. And then every year, it's actually required by the state that officers continue to receive continuing educational credits that pertain to the job. So the officers in Charles County are constantly going to, you know, trainings, whether they're virtual webinars or they're out of state, out of county, and that way they can kind of network with other animal control officers, other law enforcement officers within different, you know, jurisdictions. So there's a lot of continuing education because laws are forever changing, regulations are forever changing, the ideas in which people think and act are always changing. So just for everyone to kind of stay on the same page and learn about the, you know, updates in their state. So
Love it. I appreciate that it's an ongoing process. So talk to us a little bit about the uniform, because we get a lot of questions of like, why do you look like police? Why are you've got for our listeners who can't see, you're wearing a Kevlar vest.
Correct.
So why do animal control officers look the way they do? It sounds like such an elementary question.
Yeah, I think that there's just this narrative, and I'm not sure does it come from like the first Lady and the Tramp movie where it's just a dog catcher running down the street with a net and just scooping up dogs and just throwing them into a kennel. And so we've always just kind of been labeled as a dog catcher. And it's really, I kind of cringe a little bit when people call me that, because it's, sure, I catch dogs, but I do so much more. My officers do so much more, you know, so kind of going back to what we talked about, we are sworn peace officers through the state of Maryland. So just like a police officer is sworn, we are too, and we enforce the laws just as police officers do. We respond to quite a few of the same calls that the police do. I mean, we're handling sometimes the same calls, because animal related crimes don't always just include animals. There's a lot of times a human element to domestic violence, you know, and a lot of times when there's been a ton of studies that have been done on domestic violence cases where, you know, this individual is beating their spouse, their, you know, partner, and then they're also beating their cat or their dog and the children. Like, it's just a huge realm, and it's a sad situation to be a part of. But there's so many investigations that if police are involved, a lot of times animal control is involved.
Because if there's a 911 call, you guys are going to support the officers and the family, and
correct. Yeah, if there's an animal element to it, yes,
you're going as well.
So, you know, we operate kind of parallel with the sheriff's office in multiple investigations. So that's why we have a ballistics vest, and that's why we, you know, look the way that we do, because we're not just a dog catcher out there with a net. As funny as it sounds, but when you really look into the nitty gritty of what we do, it's a very dangerous job. I mean, we're knocking on the same doors that the police are knocking on, and there actually have been multiple reports within the country that people have called animal control to their door for it's a false complaint. The officer didn't realize it was false, and they were actually shot on the front step because the person just wanted to target animal control. So we are looked at as police. We aren't a police officer. We are a peace officer, but we still are law enforcement. So that's why we have the protection that we do and why we look the way that we do.
And the county wants you to be safe.
Correct.
Yeah. And then I know, Liz, we're going to talk a little bit about Fourth Amendment stuff in a while of how to keep our officers safe, but also protecting rights. But let's see if Lieutenant Rosche gives me a dirty look when I say this. Can I ask you about my favorite story about?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my favorite story is when I first started in this role. Chief Thomas said that the reason that you guys started wearing the ballistic vests is because of the emus.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you, because this is my favorite. Do you
Sure.
mind doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So back in the 80s, I believe it was like mid 80s, people started raising emus, which are a large bird. Everyone kind of mistakes them as an ostrich, but they're a smaller version. And they were kind of like the hot new red meat. Everyone thought they were going to be able to produce them faster like cows, but they were able to, you know, advertise emu meat, and this is the new fad, right? didn't quite work out that way. Clearly, there's not emu meat sold in the
It's not
stores.
super popular, right.
But back in the 80s, it was super popular. And, with a new fad comes new issues. So these emus were getting out of their pens. They were running loose through neighborhoods. And
Charles County went amok with emus.
Yes.
I love it.
So,
okay.
and this wasn't really even just Charles County. It was kind of across the board because it was this new fad. So emus have large feet, and their way of protection, self-protection, is they would use their talons to kick or slice someone or something that's trying to harm them. So it was actually it happened to quite a few people where they were kicking humans, and it actually sliced their stomach and would gut the individual trying to catch this emu. And so that's actually the main reason why animal control started wearing these ballistic vests, because these also have a stab plate in them. So the talon of the emu would, catch their vest and it wouldn't cut them. But then it just developed that, as time goes on, correct.
So I have to say that is like one of my favorite stories, because it's just such an interesting, like, how things evolve. And I picture all those emos. So thank you for humoring me and humoring our watchers and listeners with that story. Okay, so I'm going to circle back. We're going to get back on track. We're going to stop talking about emus, I promise. One of the things we wanted to talk about today was, we did training, education, your uniform, why you're dressed like that. We talked a lot, and you mentioned the stigma of, like, this idea of you're the dog catcher, you're the bad guy, you're just there scooping up people's pets, and that's not true, that education is actually such a bigger part of your job than even the enforcement. So talk to us a little bit about the education, and then I'm going to ask Liz to chime in of, like, there's two sides to every perspective, right? So the idea that, like, we want our community to be educated, we want you all to be safe, but we also want to make sure our residents are safe and that their rights are protected. Right. So start, please, with the education piece of what you all do.
Yeah, so I think there is, like you said, that negative stigma of we're the dog catchers. If we show up to your house, we're automatically removing your animal, whether it's your dog or cat, horse, whatever it is. And that's just not the case. It has to be a very egregious situation in order for us to be able to legally remove your animal. Because, again, everything that we do is based off of law. We can't operate just kind of however we want. It has to be based off of what the law entails.
And you don't want extra animals,
No.
because the animals that you take
No.
have to go to the animal care center, which is
and
taxing
they're already
on.
full.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. So I think that, like, what I would love for people to understand is when I show up, or one of my officers show up to your house, because let's say we have a welfare concern. Someone says, oh, hey, this individual's dog is tied up outside in the backyard. I just don't think they're taking care of it properly. There's a checklist that their officers are going down in their head to say, okay, Max has a dog house, he has water, but he doesn't have, proper bedding in his dog house. And so we go down the checklist and we kind of see, what does he have, what does he not have, what can we educate the owner on to say, hey, he does have to have X, Y, and Z, and we were going to give you a time frame to give you time to correct these problems.
And these are all based off of law. This isn't just like,
100%.
I would like this to look different.
Yes.
This is what the state or the county says must happen. Okay.
Absolutely. So that's where our education comes in. We try to give people a copy of our county regulations. We have it in a booklet, and we try to highlight, this is actually what's required by the county, again, derived from state law, that you have to provide for your dog or your cat or your horse or whatever it is that there's a discrepancy on, right? And as an officer, again, like you said, I don't want to take your dog. I do not want to remove pet from owner. I don't want to remove family member from owner.
Yeah.
Some people don't like that animals are allowed to be housed outside, and regardless of my personal belief, the law allows you to house an animal outside. It doesn't matter what I think or feel. It's what the law says, right? So being able to work with people is just an amazing resource, I think, for us, because it helps educate. This is what's required of you.
Right.
But then if someone doesn't abide by what they're required to do, then we have to take further steps. But our first action that we want to take is education.
Right, always. That makes sense. And Liz, talk a little bit about, you and I had chatted in prepping for this about the idea that what animal control can do and can't do in terms of just showing up at someone's house.
Yeah, but first what I'm going to do is build on
please.
something it is that Katy was talking about, where somebody will give a call and say, hey, I don't think this person's animal is being cared for. Can you please come check it out? In past episodes of Cracking the Code, we also talked about the inspector's roles in terms of enforcing other zoning regulations and things like that. I think to really highlight the fact that what they're doing is really educating here with animal control, I think people do need to realize that the county isn't just out there putting people out there to go and enforce the laws and look over fences
The
and
animal
say
control
you're
officers
doing
are not just driving around looking for things to inspect,
no, many
right?
things.
That's such a great point to bring up.
When anybody from county, particularly now for this episode, animal control, sometimes it really is driven by other residents' complaints or other residents' inquiries. So we're not just out there saying you're being bad. We're going to look and see what we can see.
Right.
I think that's something that's really quite important.
That's such a good point. Yeah, thank you.
And then you were also getting into, well, how far can they go? Like I said, you're not going to go and like jump through like places it is that really are personal type areas. Like I said, you really are, as Katy said, they're peace officers. They're limited by what it is that the state law and what the general law is going to go ahead and say. You don't just go crashing into somebody's house to do X and Y and Z. You have to have some reasonable suspicion, cause, report, something. So I do want to make sure it is that
these are, because I do think there's that negative stigma. I think it does exist of I see you coming and you look like you look like you're looking for trouble and you're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't look for trouble. Last thing I want to talk about are kind of big picture, the roles and responsibilities of the animal control officer, and then we'll talk a little bit about some regulations and some resources. You fall under the Department of Emergency Services.
Correct.
You are the animal control officer. But there's also the Animal Care Center, and those are different things. What's the quick description of the difference between what you do versus what the shelter does,
Sure.
please?
So the Animal Control Division, it's actually the Animal Care and Control Division.
Thank you.
But there's two separate entities to it. There's Animal Control Officers and like the Animal Control Division itself, and then the Animal Care side of the division. So the Animal Control Officers are kind of what we've been talking about. We enforce the laws and regulations, and then the Animal Shelter are the individuals who are responsible for the continued care of these animals. So whenever an Animal Control Officer picks up an animal, if it's not reunited with an owner, it goes down to the care center, and the staff at the care center is responsible for the daily care, feeding, watering, ensuring if it needs medication that they administer that, and then adoption and rescue and things of that nature.
But totally different than the enforcement
Totally
side.
different,
Yep,
yes.
that makes sense. Okay.
A very important role, but very different.
Yeah, and that they need, both sides need the other side.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about the top regulations. You said rabies comes up a lot, and licensing. What are some of the other things that you want people to know about in terms of rules and regulations that you wish people had this kind of education
Sure.
on?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to that, a lot of things that our officers deal with quite regularly is complaints of public nuisance. And a huge portion of the public nuisance is running at large or just letting your animals kind of just wander off, and they think that Fido will just come back because they can just roam wherever Fido wants to. And in Charles County, there is a leash law. Your animal has to stay on your property. We understand that things happen, but you can't just allow Fido to roam and go wherever he pleases. So that is a pretty...
One that you get a lot of.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a brain fart
No,
there
no,
for
you're
a second.
fine.
Yeah.
It makes sense because I assume that's something that you get calls about on both sides. If you get the why is my neighbor's dog doing this, but also the neighbor saying like it's not a big deal, like he just wanders. And
some
so
people don't care, some people do care.
Yes.
Regardless of the stance, they have to be on a leash.
The law is
and
the law.
that applies to any animal. Any animal that you own has to remain on your property.
Makes sense. We talked a little bit about making money versus not making money. How do you guys respond to that kind of stuff? And what do you want people to know?
We talked about it a little bit in the last Cracking the Code we did with commercial animal establishments and fanciers. So another call that we run pretty frequently are people that are breeding, specifically dogs. It's more of a popular, but some people do breed cats. But dogs are the more popular, animal to breed. So there are regulations pertaining to that, and that's something that we do investigate. Does this individual actually have the correct amount of animals to obtain a license? Because in Charles County, you have to actually meet the criteria for adult, unaltered, meaning they're not fixed animals. And they actually have to, be maybe advertising puppies or stud service or something like that.
They're not just a personal pet.
Correct. So that's something that we get a lot of complaints about, and a lot of it is maybe someone has 2 dogs that they're breeding. They don't really qualify for that license. We still got to educate. Do you have a rabies vaccination? Do you have a county license? Are these animals being housed and taken care of properly? But as far as if you're making a profit, or if you're saying I'm giving these animals away for a donation, or I'm just giving them away for free, you still have to have that license,
Right.
regardless of whether you're officially making money or not. But there are regulations pertaining to breeding animals, or even having over a certain
That
amount.
many.
So if you have over 10 animals and you're not using them, and when I say animals, I mean domestic, as far as cats, dogs, guinea pigs, things like that. Livestock is kind of regulated by the Maryland Department of Agriculture, so we really don't get into the breeding aspect of that at all. But your kind of companion animals, if you have over 10, then you also have to be what's considered a fancier, and that's just more of just making sure, is there animal hoarding happening? Are all, you have so many animals to take care of. Are you taking on a little bit more than you can chew?
Right.
Is it getting to be just too much? Because a lot of people have a bleeding heart, and they mean well, but now are we getting up into 40, 50 animals, and it's just too much. So that's kind of
And
what we...
I think what's interesting is what you're describing is that none of these are, again, I keep going back to this, and I feel like I'm fixating on it. None of these are an animal control officer's choice. Like, none of this is like, I looked around your house and I think this isn't
Right.
okay. Or I looked around and I counted and I think it looks like you have too many. These are written out, and Liz, we talk about this so much of, you don't need to know all of the rules and the codes and the laws. It's this, but you need to know enough to say, before I make the puppies,
Yes.
can I make the
Can I-
puppies?
right.
So I
Can
remember
I-
you talked about that
can I
before.
and where?
Right,
Mhm.
and
Right.
and knowing
And
about it.
Something that I always, when I train all new officers, I tell them I can't enforce feelings. I can only enforce the facts. I
Right.
can only enforce the laws. So I think a lot of people really do care about animals, and we do too. That's why we do this job. But I think that a lot of the misinterpretation of what it is that animal control does is kind of misconstrued by someone's feelings versus what's actually written in black and white in the law. And there is a little bit of wiggle room and officer discretion in laws,
Right.
but ultimately I can't enforce what I think. If I don't agree with someone, tying their dog out or putting in a kennel outside or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's what's written in the law.
That
If I
makes
don't agree
sense.
with someone breeding a certain breed of dogs, it doesn't matter because they're allowed to do it as long as they follow the correct steps.
That is it.
So that's a huge misconception.
And Liz, you talk about all the time that these are not, these laws and codes were also not written willy-nilly. They're designed, like I was trying to think the other day of how you word it, but that we want Charles County to be.
We want it to be the wonderful place it is that we know it to be. We have to make sure it is that people are being considerate of what it is that's going on in a certain area so that they're not creating a disturbance for other neighbors. It's part of being a good neighbor in a lot
Yeah.
of ways.
And I think that's such a hard one of individual versus neighbor, and that's I'm glad we have the laws and the regulations so it doesn't just become my definition versus your definition, but this is what Charles County agreed on.
Right.
Yeah. I want to wrap up today to talk about some of the resources that you guys also offer. So we've talked a lot about, you kind of engaging with our community because either something went wrong or somebody thought there might be, kind of the negative side. But what's the more proactive, how you engage with community members all the time? What are some of the things that are
Yes.
resources available?
So we offer, in conjunction with the Charles County Health Department, we offer several free rabies clinics every year. So the health department provides the rabies vaccinations, and then we have clinics that we advertise throughout the year that people can actually receive as many free rabies vaccinations for their animals as they would like. They bring their animals to our clinic. We have a couple of licensed veterinarians that administer the vaccinations, and then they get, their rabies tag, they get their certificate, and then, it's 100% free.
Which I love because that's saving not just the money of the vaccine, but that's if
Right.
somebody has a hard time getting their animal to the vet and paying the vet fee and everything
Because it
else.
is expensive.
Yeah, so that's a great, okay, so we've got the
Yeah.
rabies clinics and partnerships. Talk
Yeah.
to us about the partnerships.
Yeah, so we have, and this kind of ties with our the animal care center is the Feline Felons Cat Cafe. So it's kind of one of our rescue partners. They actually, all the cats that are at their facility are actually cats from the animal care center. They're a wonderful rescue that kind of helps bring cats that maybe aren't quite as friendly or sociable that are in a shelter setting, and they bring them kind of more to like a home setting, and people can actually go into the cat cafe and they can, play with the cats and interact with them and really see their personalities so they can adopt them. And then, we have a ton of different rescues that we work with that the shelter has a ton of contact information for, that maybe it's specific breeds, or we have a barn cat program at our shelter that, maybe we have a cat that's a little fractious, has never really grown up in a home, but is, still not so aggressive that it can still be adopted out to someone. And maybe we can adopt it out to warehouses or farms, wineries for rodent control. So maybe it's not necessarily living in someone's home, but it's still at someone's home.
It's safe.
At their property. They're being taken care
I'm
of.
laughing at
and,
the idea of doing interviews for them of you're a cat who should go to the Feline Felons Cat Cafe. You're a cat who needs to go to the
Swipe
Working
left,
Cat program.
swipe right,
A little personality test tells me that you're going to be more of a working cat.
So, it's nice to have that because, again, and I know I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole and something that we can talk about in future podcasts.
She's committed. Did you hear that, Liz?
Know.
She just said future. I heard it.
But it's kind of helps with the stigma of we just euthanize,
Right.
and these are the rescues that we use are the avenue to avoid that, right? So we have so many rescues and partners that we can work with to get these animals placed into new homes. So.
Love it. All right. One of the things that I wanted to just throw out there as a special thank you is that we just got through the ice storm of January 2026, and I know Animal Care and Control was doing a really great job, especially of that when the emergency shelter opened, making sure that people could come with their animal, which is just a nice I'm proud to be part of a county that if we know that we want people to be safe, it might mean that they bring their animal with them. So a unique way, again, that you guys are out in the community doing stuff. So thank you. I want to wrap today up because otherwise, again, I feel like we could talk for a long time about this, but we want her to come back. So future episodes, we talked about myths and facts, and we'll do a little bit more about the education piece, I think, so that people, I think, Liz, I don't know about you, but I feel like that's the most important part is that so many of the complaints we get about why is Charles County telling me I can't do this happened because somebody started doing it and had to stop, which cost money, which cost time, which cost energy. So finding ways of before you start, before you make the puppies, know that you can. Yeah.
Know what you can do.
Katy and Liz, takeaways for today. Katy, I'm going to start with you. What's the one thing that after somebody's watched or listened to this episode, what's the one thing that you hope that they will remember and take away from this?
Yeah, I think that the misconstrued ideas or the myths that people hear, it starts with one person. So if one person can have their kind of ideas changed to kind of look outside the box. But I think the biggest thing that I think for me and for most, if not all of my officers is just come talk to us. If you have a complaint or if you have an idea or you have something that you're just not sure of, maybe you just don't have all the information, talk to an animal control officer, look up the regulations. Don't just believe what you see on Facebook or social media or what your neighbor thinks.
Go directly to the source.
Yeah, learn for yourself what it is that animal control does, because so many of the complaints that we field are based upon a myth that this person has heard from their neighbor or someone 3 doors down that they it's just not factual. So I think if people were able to take the time to actually come to the source, whether it's to an animal control officer or to maybe a county attorney or just looking up online the regulations to help further educate themselves, I think that would make a huge difference in our community.
That's awesome. Thank you. Liz, takeaway.
I would dovetail on exactly what Katy said.
Yeah.
I think so much of it is education and what it is that you can do. So many misconceptions lead people to believing that they can do things. For example, you live out in an area where you have an acre or 2 acres. Oh, I could go ahead and have 2 cane corsos and go ahead and breed them and have lots and lots of them and not have to report it because I'm way out here where nobody can
I own
hear.
this.
Right,
This is
I own
mine.
This is
Yes.
mine.
Right.
But once again, there are zoning laws that say that this is what you can have for this animal, whether it's domestic or it's or if it's an agricultural animal. There are things that you can't do, and I think really to emphasize what Katy said, please reach out and give a call. Ask questions, don't deal with just the misconceptions. Don't
Right.
get caught up in that echo chamber of what it is that you've heard that you can do in Charles County, because at some point somebody's going to call and complain, and then all of a sudden you've got somebody saying, hey, we're going to educate today, and if they don't comply with it, the next
Then
thing you know,
there's
we're
enforcement.
enforcement.
Right.
And we want to avoid
avoid the enforcement so that
Exactly.
it can just be
Stop
the
and ask
proactive education.
questions.
And I think, Liz, you said something that stuck with me of, the idea that this is my property, I can do what I want, but this is our Charles County, which means you doing what you want on your property has an impact on the entire county. And that's why
Yes.
these rules and regulations apply, is that people need to have a community that's livable for everybody. So
Well stated.
Excellent. Well, I so appreciate you both being here. Katy Rosche, our Animal Control Lieutenant, thank you for joining us
Thanks for having me.
for one of what will be many more.
Yeah, like I said, 20 years.
20 more years. I love it.
Put herself on the hook.
Liz, that means you're committed to another 20 years. You in?
We'll talk about it later.
Liz Theobalds, our wonderful Deputy County Attorney.
And
Thank you so
thanks
much for
again.
being here.
Thanks again.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope that this episode was helpful for you to learn more about what animal control's role is in Charles County. And as you heard, there'll be more episodes to come. If you go back to our previous episodes of Cracking the Code, you can learn more about all other things related to zoning, permits, and regulations and codes here in Charles County. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and stay engaged.
Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, search Charles County Government on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe. We're also available on YouTube. Search Charles County Commissioners. And stay connected for all county news, information, and programs by visiting www.charlescountymd.gov/stay connected.